Behind home plate, we bringing it to them all day. You know what's up? Welcome to Birdland. Win or lose, we bringing it to you always. You know what's up? Welcome to Birdland. Orange or black, we rebuild the pack. No matter where we at, you know we coming back. Section 336, we on this, so tune in. You know what's up? Welcome to Birdland. Yeah, welcome to Birdland. You know what's up? Welcome to Birdland. Now, here come the boys from Section 336.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Baltimore sports fans of all ages, welcome to Section 336. I am your Endearing host, Matt Soroka. And as always, I'm joined by... actually, Josh isn't here. I'm going solo, but I'm going to have a guest. So don't turn the podcast off yet. It's not just going to be me yapping for 40 minutes. I got a guest. I just wait for it. Josh is unable to join us. He's not feeling well. And you know Josh is sick. Dear listeners, here's why you know Josh is sick. Because I have it from reliable source that they won their first Little League playoff game. And I believe this is, you listeners probably know better than I do because you pay attention more on this podcast than I do. And we only ever talk about Little League on this podcast. This is Josh's first ever win, I think. It was his second win. I can't remember if he won one game or if he just almost won a game. So this is either Josh's first ever win or his second ever win, and it's a playoff game. And you know he wanted to talk about it. And so you have to wait till next week so Josh can tell his Little League story about how they won a game in the playoffs. Because he's sick. And clearly he's sick, or he would come on here and talk about, I know he wants to come here and talk about that win. Oh, he's got some stuff to say about it. As far as Orioles news, listen, so far quiet hot stove, much to no one's surprise. This is what we're going to do every week, I think. Talk about a pitcher who was signed, who the Orioles should have, could have, didn't sign, and lament the fact that the Orioles don't spend money. So that's this week's Orioles news. There was a good starting pitcher signed. We should have probably signed him. We didn't, alas. In good Orioles news, Felix Bautista unanimously won the reliever of the AL reliever of the year, as he should have. Impressive for not even pitching September and still winning the award. So good for him. All right. I have a guest today. I'm excited about this conversation. We don't do guests a lot, but this is my podcast. So if I want to have a guest, I can do a guest because it's my podcast. Do what I want. And so if I want to have a guest, I'm going to have someone who I really want to talk to. And the person I really want to talk to today is an author of children's chapter books, Ballpark Mysteries series, David Kelly. And my son and I, Silas, we love his books. So I wanted to get him on here to talk about his books and for my son to think I'm cool because I talked to, the author of his favorite books. But a really interesting conversation because, Josh and I, this podcast, right, is framed around the idea of Josh and I and our dad and our love of baseball and how this was kind of not just our thing. This is a family thing, right? It's not a random that Josh is my brother. He does a podcast with me. Like, this is a family affair. And the Danny when Burt Rohde, for you coconuts, you remember, brother-in-law, he qualified, even though, the in-law part. But this was always a podcast about our love of our dad and our love of baseball and how these things are not separate ideas, but our identities as sons is very much tied to our identity as Oriole fans, right? These are one and the same. And so now we're transitioning in life, Josh and I. I have a son who's 6. Josh has children who are now being grown, but he now also has a stepson who's 9 and right, coaches Little League, right? So a lot of our talk is Little League and my Little League experience, right? Because now we're talking more about not our dad and our experience, but now our experience as dads and our sons. And so in that kind of vein, in that light, one of the ways my son and I bond over baseball is through reading, and through specifically this series called Ballpark Mysteries. And so I got the author of Ballpark Mysteries on the podcast, and I hope you enjoy this conversation half as much as I enjoyed this conversation. I'm now excited to be joined on the podcast by David Kelly, author of the Ballpark Mystery series. David, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Matt. It's great to be here. Happy to talk about my books and share my writing insights with you. It's great to be talking books and baseball and reading.
Absolutely, and I'll just be up front with this whole thing. I'm a huge fan. I've read all of them except for the newest one. My son and I, when I booked you as a guest here, the first person I told was my son, who was pumped as well. I have a 6 year old who was excited that I was talking to you. So I'm all in. You don't need to sell me on your books. I'm all in. Um, Before I jump in with my questions, can you, for listeners who are unfamiliar with Ballpark Mysteries, the Ballpark Mystery series, can you provide kind of a brief elevator pitch of what the series is?
Sure. So, yeah, I'm happy to do that. So, I've written a series of books called the Ballpark Mysteries series, and they're basically mysteries set in Major League Baseball stadiums. There's 23 books in the series. You can read them in any order, and they're really great for kids in elementary school. Ideally, kind of kids in grades, 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 and 5. And the books are a lot of fun because they're fiction, but they also have nonfiction components. They're set in real places, baseball stadiums, and sometimes they include historical figures. And they also include some information about the teams and the locations and the cities that the stories take place in. And my two main characters are Kate and Mike, and they're cousins. And they travel to different baseball stadiums to see a game or take a tour, and then they get involved in a mystery. So, for example, I live outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So, of course, I made the first book called The Fenway Foul Up, a Red Sox mystery. And my characters, Mike and Kate, go to Fenway Park to see a game, and they're watching batting practice, and they're watching the star slugger for the Boston Red Sox, Big D, hit a whole lot of home runs. And then at the end of the first chapter, his lucky baseball bat gets stolen. So Mike and Kate have to figure out what happened to the missing baseball bat in that book. And that's just an example of the type of mystery they find. And in the second book, they go to Yankee Stadium. And of course, in that book, they find the ghost of Babe Ruth. So they have to figure out what's going on, why the ghost of Babe Ruth might be haunting Yankee Stadium. So that gives you some idea of the mysteries that you'll find in the stories. And again, I've covered 19 ballparks so far. The latest one is a New York Mets mystery called The Black Cat Changeup. And there will be more books on the way. So they're a lot of fun, a lot of great ways to introduce kids to some of baseball history, as well as locations, as well as get them engaged in reading.
Yeah, and for us Oriole fans, there's the Baltimore Bandit, which takes place in Camden Yards. So you've gotten that stadium covered already. And I'll be upfront. I'll share some of the things I love about your books, and then feel free to respond to any of them or just take in the praise.
Yeah.
The first thing I like is, and we started reading them. Actually, I started reading them out loud to my son when he was 5 in kindergarten, and it was really important to me to get my son into reading, and I wanted to kind of take the next step to chapter books, and I was struggling. Like, we tried books that I liked when I was a kid, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. We couldn't get into it. I remember around Christmas time last year, we tried The Very Best Worst Christmas Pageant, which my wife loved as a kid. Couldn't get into it. We tried some of the Roald Dahl books. Couldn't get into it. So, like, we went through a series of books, and then I found the Ballpark Mystery just in my local library, and it involved both kind of geography and stadiums, and also baseball. And my son is kind of fascinated with different cities and geography. He also loves baseball. And from, I think the first book we read was the Atlanta Alibi book, and he was hooked from that moment. And then we ran through every series, and we requested and waited at a library for those books to come. So I love that idea that if we want to get young people into reading, right, we need to kind of align their interests with what they're reading, because you can want to read to your kids all you want, but if they don't find any interest or engagement with it, they're not gonna get into it, especially when you start talking about longer chapter books with young kids.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And it's really interesting to hear your personal experience with that. And, some kids, it's harder to get them engaged in reading. And it's so important in terms of language development and writing and just general education. It's such an important part of their developmental process, that I really love that I'm in a position where I'm helping some kids get into reading, being able to create stories that capture their attention and and kind of bring them back or to the book they've already read, which I get a lot of fans that just readers that just keep reading the same book over and over again. But of course, they have the rest of the series to enjoy. Um, but I also think something that's important with the Ballpark Mystery books is that kind of blend of nonfiction and fiction. So the stories are made up, but the locations in many cases are real, and there's those facts and kind of information. It kind of makes the books chewy and makes it more a lot more for kids readers to grab onto when they're either listening to the stories as they did with you or reading them, because they can identify, with real places that maybe they've been or that they want to go. Just as you mentioned, the geography was important to your son, and so I find that the readers really enjoy that part of the book, and they enjoy there's a chapter of nonfiction facts and information at the end of each book, and kids really like that too. So that's an important part of kind of getting them into reading and getting them into the series.
No, I completely agree, and that was another thing I wanted to comment is those kind of pieces at the end. And as a dad who's also trying to kind of instill an appreciation for baseball, an appreciation for history, and you look at all the, it's kind of fascinating. You look at the Orioles, for example, and all the places that they moved before they ended up in Baltimore, and kind of their history of World Series is, and kind of to share that with my son, where I knew a little about the history, but he knew nothing about that history, is pretty cool. So I just as a parent who kind of likes to connect with my son over baseball, reading about those facts at the end, and he would never skip over them. He would always want to read those facts at the end. So yeah, I think that's a really strong part of the book as well.
Yeah,
The other,
and that's always
yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to jump in. That's always a challenge for me is what facts to put in there and what to leave out, because I end up with so much research and so much information that I have about each team or location or stadium, especially for ones that have been around for a long time,
Mhm.
that it's a lot of stuff ends up on the cutting room floor to say, kind of I can't fit everything in. And I've thought sometimes of going back and making a second book about each team, because there's just usually so much more information that I could put into the book, but the format doesn't really allow that. But it is kind of fun. And the other thing I'll point out is that one of the reasons I started writing these books is I have two sons, and back when they were in elementary school,
Mhm.
they were doing three things. They were kind of playing a lot of baseball, and they were reading a lot of mystery books, and they were reading a lot of sports books. And I thought it'd be kind of
Oh,
cool to put
interesting.
all those things together. I could always find sports books, and I could always find mystery books, but I didn't find a lot of sports mysteries. And I thought that'd be kind of a cool combination. And that's really how I came up with the idea for the Ballpark Mysteries. Why not have a mystery in each of the Major League Baseball stadiums? And it actually turns out it's a really great idea because each of the teams and stadiums has such a unique history and a unique location and things that are very idiosyncratic about each of the ballparks or the players or managers that have been on the teams, that it gives me a lot to work with when I'm trying to come up with a mystery, and I'll try to find something interesting about that team or stadium to kind of build a mystery around. So it's a lot to work with, and it's a lot of fun to try to figure out how those things all fit together.
Yeah, and I think that's what's cool about your series, particularly with baseball, because I think this is not the same in other sports. Baseball, the stadiums are unique, right? Like in your book about Wrigley Field, the ivy becomes part of the mystery. Like you incorporate
Right.
aspects of the stadium into the mystery. In the Colorado book, like the altitude
Yeah.
becomes, and where you keep the baseballs become part of the mystery. So yeah, I like how you incorporate those kind of unique, quirky things about baseball and about their stadiums, that they don't just be. And I guess the way to put this is like the settings are part of the story, right? They're not just a backdrop. It's not just like a random, let's just put this story here. They're an integral part often of the mystery, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I try to do that. And in some books I'm more successful than other books, and but I do try to pick out unique things about the teams or the stadiums that I can kind of feature or focus or build either a clue or one of the mystery elements around. And again, not everything fits into the book, but it's really fun to try to unlock that puzzle and see how much I can get into each book about the teams or the stadiums or the history. And they're so different and so unique. It's really fun to try to build the mysteries around them.
Yeah, and the history too is, I mentioned the back of the book, but even within the stories, like you talk about in the Baltimore book, Babe Ruth and his kind of origins in Baltimore, which I don't know if everyone knows about that. Everyone in Baltimore knows about that, but I don't know if people outside
Yeah.
of Baltimore know about that, which is really cool. And I think the most recent one we read was the special, one of the special books on Cooperstown, which is one of my favorite
Yep.
books, where it talks about the Honus Wagner baseball card, and
Yeah.
kind of the specialty around that. And so how your stories are fictitious, but how they kind of incorporate some real facts is, I think, a really cool part of the books.
Yeah, so that's Christmas in Cooperstown. It's
Yes.
a holiday featured book, which is a lot of fun, and it is set at the Cooperstown National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, and that's because my two main characters, Kate and Mike, actually live in Cooperstown. I figure if I'm going to be writing Ballpark Mysteries, the kids featured in them should probably live in Cooperstown. Um, and that was kind of fun to try to figure out how to build a mystery around the Hall of Fame. And I know that kids love money, and they also love baseball cards. And the idea of a Honus
Mhm.
Wagner baseball card worth I think that might be even $3 million now. It's worth a lot of money. They had one on display, and I thought, what if that gets stolen? And my characters, Mike and Kate, have to figure that out. And I had the setting for that story be the Hall of Fame, but I had my characters, Mike and Kate, actually doing a sleepover at the
Yes.
Hall of Fame when the baseball card gets stolen, and it's kind of fun. Actually, I got about a month ago, I got a an email from one of my readers, one of my fans, and it was the father, and he and his son had actually just done a sleepover in the Hall of Fame,
Oh,
and he
wow.
had my Christmas in Cooperstown book with him. They had already read the book, and they were kind of replicating it. They had gone to some program that the Hall of Fame had set up where they allowed people to actually sleep in the actual Hall of Fame underneath the plaque. So you could sleep underneath the plaque of your favorite baseball player if you brought your sleeping bag. And I just thought that was so cool that they were doing that, and it was in my book.
Okay, don't mind me, but after this podcast, I'm Googling how I can do that, how I can get on that. Because
Yeah,
as
I
I
don't
was
know
reading
what.
the book, I was thinking as a grown up how cool it would be to spend the night in the hall at the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I don't know what the program was, but they did it. It was kind of cool. They sent me a picture.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah,
look into that. And you mentioned your sons, and this is again another reason I like the book is just another way because Josh and I, my brother, we started this podcast because of our love of baseball, which came from our father, who was a big Orioles fan and instilled in us. We didn't really have a choice. You're going to love baseball. And so this is a way that, my dad and I still bond over baseball, and we go to games together, and a lot of our communication kind of is communicated through the sport of baseball. Even serious topics often start with baseball. And so this is, again, I like it because it's another way for not just to my son to appreciate books and reading, but it's a way for me to connect with my son because we have this shared. It's not like he's reading a book that is I'm not into at all about ghosts or zombies or something. Like we're reading about a common interest, so it becomes
right.
this kind of bonding experience too between my son and I, not just the reading but also the content itself, which is cool.
Yeah, it's actually and it's great that you say that because as an author, one of the things I'm always looking at, of course, is my Amazon reviews and what people are writing on Amazon about
Uh-huh.
my books. Usually, it's pretty good stuff. Um, but it's kind of funny because one of the things I notice when I look at all the reviews, about 50% of them come from grandparents who are giving their grandsons
Oh,
or
interesting.
granddaughters these books as a way to kind of share a common interest. So the grandparents might be interested in baseball, have a favorite team, whether it's the Yankees or the Red Sox, and they want to find a way to share that, with their grandchild. And these books seem to really fit that bill. They draw a connection between the grandparents and your daughter, your son, that kind of thing. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun way to pass on some of that family history or some of that family interest and find a common language. So exactly what you're doing, but I find a lot of grandparents do it as well.
Yeah, that's cool. And it doesn't have to be like I read aloud to my son, though he just started reading his own chapter books, which so now I think he's going to go back and read Ballpark Mysteries because he's just started reading his own chapter books by himself.
Right.
But even the idea of like I can read it and then he can read it too, and then we can talk about it. I think
Yeah.
I think it's just great. And I don't know if I can do that with all his books, but I can certainly do it with
Right.
Ballpark Mysteries. All
Right.
right, so those are some of the reasons I'm a fan of the books. I encourage other people with children in this, I would say 5 to 12 range to check it out.
Yeah.
Um, but now let me ask you some questions. You mentioned before the research that goes into it. I'm curious. So let's say you're talking about Camden Yards or a stadium, um, even a stadium maybe that you're less familiar with. What is your process for researching the team, the stadium? How do you go about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I basically go about researching. I usually start at home. I've got a lot of baseball books on the shelf, behind me, and I start looking through those, digging up information on the team or the stadium or the city. I start cruising the internet again, looking for interesting stories about previous, players and managers, and then the history of the stadiums. But then I also take a trip to whatever team or stadium I'm writing about, whether it's Atlanta or New York. I will usually spend anywhere from 3 to 5 days kind of doing on-site research. And I do it just as you or anybody else would do the research. I don't usually get special access to anything. So I'm usually try to go to 2 baseball games or maybe 3 baseball games, and I won't usually sit down. I usually spend the time cruising around the stadium, taking a lot of pictures from every angle of all the things I can think of to take pictures of, whether it's the seats, the fans, the hot dog stands, the food stands, the condiment stands, the stairways, the roofs, any interesting features, whether it's the Coke bottle slide in the San Francisco Giants Stadium, or, the flags in Baltimore Stadium. So I'm looking for interesting things to take pictures of. I'll write down notes as I'm there as well. And so I'll go to 2 games, and then I'll also take a tour of the stadium, just the way you would take a tour of Baltimore's stadium. Try to capture all the information the tour guide says, and then we'll usually spend some time looking around the city. So when I went to research the Baltimore book, I spent probably about a day and a half just checking out sites in Baltimore, going to Babe Ruth's house, which is a great place to visit if you're in the Baltimore area. It's really kind of
Mhm.
cool to see where he was born, and some memorabilia from his life and childhood. Looked at other sites. I went to actually the site of St. Mary's Industrial School for boys, which is where he
Sure.
spent most of his formative years in Baltimore. And just kind of checking out different places. I think I even went to I went to the McCormick Spice. There was a McCormick Spice area down by the waterfront there. I don't know if it's still there, but you could kind of take a tour of the McCormick Spice Museum, kind of a thing, which is kind of cool. And that comes up in the book. Old Bay seasoning is kind of important to
Uh-huh.
Baltimore people. I turned it into Old Cove seasoning, and I gave it a different name, but I put it in the book. So anyway, I'm looking for all that kind of information, and I'll spend anywhere from 3 to 5 days doing that kind of research, taking a lot of pictures, a lot of notes, and then I come back to my home office and I sit down and I just kind of put it all in front of me, and I try to come up with things that I think that stood out or were important to me. Whether it's a location or a feature of the stadium or a particular player or a bit of history, and I'll kind of write down a list of things that kind of stood out to me, and then I try to kind of formulate a mystery around that. And that's kind of a very generalized process. I just kind of start playing with different ideas of things that could happen or could have happened, and kind of think about what might fit together. So that's kind of the overview, quick overview of the research process.
Yeah, and the mysteries are interesting because it's interesting you say that. So you come up with the setting and you kind of study the setting first, and then you add the mystery. Not here's a mystery and let me fit it in here.
Right.
Um, and because your mysteries, they and you mentioned the Boston one with the bat with the stolen bat, but sometimes they involve like food vendors or workers at the stadium. Like it's not just always about the players. Sometimes it's the surrounding stuff too that's part of a stadium, because a
Right.
baseball game has a lot going on, and sometimes
It
there's other
it does, and
characters are
there's a lot
involved.
of people, and I try to vary it. So I'm not going to have something stolen in every book. There's turns out
Mhm.
there's a lot of different ways to write a mystery story, and I kind of learned that because I'd never written a mystery story before I started writing the first one. So I went to the library and I took out a lot of children's mystery stories, and I read them all, and I started writing down a list of all the different ways you could have a mystery. So, for example, you can have a mystery where something is stolen, like a baseball bat, and that makes for a great mystery. It's very concrete. But you can also have a mystery where, say, mysterious things are happening. So in my third book, The LA Dodger, my characters Mike and Kate go to California for a Los Angeles Dodgers game, and strange things start to happen. So somebody is following them, someone breaks into their hotel, someone is sending them threatening notes. These things are happening, and we don't really know why they're happening. It's kind of like a Scooby Doo mystery, but
Mhm.
that makes for another great mystery story. But then you can also have other types of mysteries. You can have a ghost or something supernatural. I do that in book two. You might have You might have a case of mistaken identity, which somebody isn't who we think they are, and I use that idea in the Minnesota Twins book. Maybe one of the twin players on the Minnesota Twins isn't who we think he is. But there's a lot of different ways you can create a mystery story. So I kind of try to vary it from book to book, as well as varying the setting and the details and the plot.
Yeah, that's cool. You mentioned before you kind of had your sons in mind, kind of study of mystery and baseball. And by the way, I couldn't even find that many kind of early reader chapter books about baseball. Like I read Matt
Right.
Christopher a bunch, but my son wasn't ready
Yep.
for Matt Christopher. So this is so I
Yep.
couldn't even just the genre of baseball. You had kind of the kids books, like the children's books, and then you had the older readers, but not that early reader age.
Yep.
So definitely, but you mentioned your sons. They did what did they like the books? What were their thoughts?
So yeah, they do like the books, and I actually found my older son. They both liked the books, but my younger son was a little bit more interested in being involved in them. So he was always anxious to read the latest copy or the latest draft and give me feedback and that kind of stuff. And my older son read the books, but he was always a little bit more distant from them, as the kids have different personalities. But they were both super helpful as an author. I don't have all the answers. And when you're writing a mystery story, it is hard to figure things out sometimes. And sometimes I get stuck like any writer. And I find a really great way to make it past the writer's block or to find the solution to the mystery is to ask other people. So I will rely upon my wife for help, and I rely upon my sons for help too. So when I get stuck and I've got an idea like, I need a mystery at Wrigley Field and I'm not really sure what to do. And my younger son Scott said, "Well, what if there was a treasure?" And that actually fit pretty well into, like, I thought, okay, yeah, I can do that. I can make that work with the ivy. Maybe someone thinks there's a treasure buried behind the ivy that covers the outfield wall at Wrigley Field. And that kind of leads, once I get kind of a clue into the mystery, you can kind of see how the rest of it might unfold. So they've been really great resources for me, enthusiastic supporters, but also really great resources when I'm kind of stuck on a mystery point or a clue point. They can give me some ideas. So it's really helpful to have them as kind of readers and idea generation factories.
Yeah, that's cool. I do have to ask you. My son Silas would get mad at me if I didn't ask you. So, what other stadiums? Like, what are the next stadiums you're going to write about? Do you have an idea of that yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I said, I've got
Is that
19
spoiler? I
stadiums.
don't know.
No, it's okay. I got 19 stadiums I've written about. The latest one was the New York Mets mystery and the Black Cat changeup, which is a lot of fun. And I've got the four super specials, which include the Christmas super special. There's a World Series one and a Little League World Series one and a New York one. Those are all fun in their own way. So actually, the next ballpark mystery book that I'm working on is going to be a Negro Leagues mystery, and it's actually going to be set at the oldest professional baseball stadium in the country, which is actually Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh,
And it's
cool.
where the Birmingham Barons played and the Birmingham Black Barons played, including Willie Mays on a really important, I think it's 1947 team. And Mike and Kate are going to go down there, and there's going to be a mystery that is related to Satchel Paige, who was a great pitcher. There's going to be a Satchel Paige baseball that I think is going to be stolen. So it's a stolen mystery, and Mike and Kate are going to have to figure out. And actually, MLB is going to have a game at Rickwood Field in Birmingham. I think in the June of 2024. So this year coming up in June, there's going to be a major league game there.
Oh,
So it's going
wow.
to tie in really nicely with that.
Did you know about the major league game when you started writing the book,
I
or was
did,
that a
yeah.
coincidence?
I kind of it kind of came together like that. I thought they're gonna be investing in the field and in kind of the Negro Leagues and the history. There's actually going to be a Negro Leagues history exhibit at the Hall of Fame as well, and it just seemed like a really good combination to share, because it's, again, that's one of the fun things we talked about is these books. I not only get to tell a mystery story, but I get to tell a little bit of history as well. So we can kind of explore some of the challenges the black baseball players had, the reason for the Negro Leagues, and then kind of find ways to get the kids interested in learning about what happened back then and what's happening now.
Yeah, that's great. My son has read a lot about Jackie Robinson, and this is partly because in his age bracket, there's a lot of books about Jackie Robinson,
Yeah.
and so he's read several books about Jackie Robinson, so he's into that. But it's also like for a young kid of 6 to talk about issues around America's history and race and these kind of really hard conversations. I think baseball provides a really kind of nice introduction for a 6-year-old to kind of get their head around some issues, some kind of ugly issues with America's past in a way that's kind of friendlier, if you can be friendly talking about America's past and some of these some of these ideas. So I think baseball allows that, right? Because you can talk about history, you can talk about America, you can talk about this through the lens of baseball, and so it becomes not just about baseball, right? We're really reading about American society and American history, just as baseball being kind of the vehicle to talk about those issues.
Well, and yeah, because baseball is the connection, and you can't learn something unless you have a connection to it. If it's just completely disentangled from you, it's just too abstract. So
Mhm.
by understanding what the baseball players went through and what they encountered. I mean, kids know what baseball is. They've been to baseball games or seen them on TV, and they have their favorite players, and they kind of understand how today's world works. Um, but by looking at history through the lens of baseball, as you said, it really gives you kind of a direct connection. They can kind of make that, they can understand the context and the structure, and they can see, oh, these things were different, and that sounds like it was probably bad. They can understand why it would be bad or not good. So
Yeah, no, that's true,
yeah,
David. If I just try to explain it to him, it wouldn't make
yeah,
sense. He wouldn't grasp it. But
right,
yeah, but baseball allows some context from him to grasp it.
right,
Um, you mentioned your super specials. It seems that
yep.
that could be an endless possibilities of books. Do you have any kind of super specials in mind, or does the
Well,
Negro League is that
that's going to be
qualify as a
that's going
super
to be a
special?
super
Okay,
special, I think. Yeah, that's going to be a super special. And to go back to your question, I don't know what the next major league team is going to be. I'm going to figure that out after. Um, I will point out, I don't know if you've come across this. I actually published a football mystery book with Mike and Kate. So there is now perhaps a new series of
okay.
football mysteries as well, because some kids like football in addition to baseball. I just had a mystery came out called The 2 Minute Warning, where Mike and Kate go to a Dallas Cowboys football game, and it's kind of fun. And I think there's going to be a New England Patriots mystery next there. But in terms of the ballpark mysteries, yeah, there's 11 more teams that I need to do, and then there are lots more kind of super specials. I could have spring training. I could have one of their international games. I could have international games in other countries. I don't know. Do you have any ideas for super specials that
Oh,
I should be writing?
David, I got lots of ideas about everything. All right, you came to an idea guy. I don't have the skill or talent to implement any ideas, but I can generate tons of ideas.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure. I have some super special. I have a few ideas. Some are ridiculous, but some are within the realm of possibility. What I like is, and you mentioned that history. So I was thinking about like ways to tell kind of fictitious stories that mirror historical events, like major historical events around baseball, where um, where if you're reading it, a kid might not pick it up, but the adult reader will say, "Okay, I understand what's going on," and then you can have the chapter at the end to bring it together. But like some major events, I was thinking like the 1989 earthquake in the Oakland Athletics San Francisco series, some kind of, it doesn't mean earthquake, some kind of natural event, kind of that
Yeah.
impacts baseball. Not to get too personal. I know you're from you live in Massachusetts, but the even some famous plays like the Billy Buckner through the legs play.
Uh-huh.
I think it might be interesting
Yeah.
to maybe provide some sort of mystery that led to an incident like the Billy Buckner incident. And there's
Yeah.
here in Baltimore, we are very familiar with in 1996 the ALCS Yankees versus Orioles. A little 12-year-old kid, Jeffrey Mayer, leaned over and stole a home run and they didn't call interference, stole a home run, or I'm sorry, stolen out from Tony Tarasco, and it became a home run. And even though I think we lost that series in like 5 games, so we blame us not going to the World Series because of
Yeah.
Jeffrey Mayer leaning over. And the thing that irritates all of Baltimore about that incident is Jeffrey Mayer then became kind of this hero in New York, and he was on all the talk shows for stealing a home run. Another one, I don't know if this is too soon. This might be too soon, David, but the trash can banging with the Astros,
Yep.
some sort, that's a definite mystery, right? They're already kind of embedded there.
It is.
Uh,
Yeah.
those are a few.
Those are great. Those are great ideas. And
I
maybe
left
I
off
could.
steroids. I thought maybe steroids too, but I thought no, that's you're gonna stay
Yeah,
away
I
from
don't know if I can
steroids.
do that. And just so you know, my editor said I can't have any dead bodies either. So
Okay, no
that's
dead
not going to
bodies.
be a mystery option.
Yeah,
But actually, no, you probably could do something around steroids. Maybe not steroids, but maybe one of the players could be, you know, drinking a special, mixture or juice or something
yeah, like
that
a
he thinks
Space
gives him
Jam
power.
super juice or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you could do something like that. But that's those are great ideas, and that's kind of where I start. I write down ideas, I think about ideas, what could happen or what should I do. But the idea of kind of tying some of them more directly into some historical events would be an interesting angle to pursue. And the problem is finding the time to do it. I've got
Yeah,
11 more teams to go, and but no, I'll certainly actually think about that as I keep writing the books.
yeah. I have lots of ideas, David. But no talent or energy to implement any of them. The other thing is my son right now is going through the Magic Treehouse books, and something
Yep.
interesting about them is, and he hasn't read any of these yet, but I've noticed they have like the Magic Treehouse books 1 through whatever, and then they have a companion book, which is like the. Are you aware of this? Like the fact,
Facts.
the
Yeah.
fact tracker, which tells kind of more the facts behind the mystery, which is kind of like taking one of your chapters and I guess extending it out to a whole book to
Yeah.
accompany the mystery.
I've thought about that. I haven't thought about it to the level of actually doing something about it. Sitting down saying, if I was going to write some kind of fact book about the Red Sox and the Yankees, what would I put in there? But certainly there's a lot of information, and it would be a nice companion. So it is something I might return to think about doing, because it would be kind of fun to for the kids that really liked one of the specific teams or mysteries. They might want to dig a little deeper. So it'd be kind of fun to pull that together.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the football is great, and I saw that, and I think that's a really good idea. And I mean, my son today like said, "Hey, are you ready to play our first football game of the year?" And I was like, "We always play baseball in the back." I was like, "Football? Where is this even coming from?" But it is like it's different seasons now. Everyone's talking about
It is.
everyone's talking about football, so it makes
Yep.
sense in
Yep.
football season. You read football books, and baseball season we get back
Yep.
to the baseball book. So that makes
Yep.
sense. They're not competing seasons here. There's time for both.
That's right. That's right. Usually they're not. Yeah.
Yeah, usually not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we always judge Orioles success, or we used to. I think we have a new standard now, where can you keep us entertained until the Ravens start? But now the Orioles have a new standard now because they're actually good. David, were you a big baseball fan growing up, or were you more interested in the mystery and writing side of things?
Yeah, I was actually more interested in the mystery side. I was not a big baseball fan growing up. I mean, I played general backyard sports. We had a lot of kids in the neighborhood, so I ended up playing a lot of sports, but I was not a super sports fanatic, and I didn't really have a favorite team. I kind of liked the Orioles, but I lived in upstate New York, and we were about 5 hours from the Red Sox or the Yankees, and nobody was super into any baseball team. So I actually kind of really got into baseball when my sons were younger, because they just grabbed onto baseball and the Red Sox, and they were able to stay up late watching the Red Sox game. If that's what they were watching, they get an extra half hour, and so that was great watching TV with them and kind of sharing that experience. And I saw how energized it made them, so that kind of got me into baseball. And for me, that's perfect, because these books, I don't have to be a baseball expert to write the books. I do have to understand the game and the players and the history and that kind of stuff. But it's kind of fun to write for that age group that's just getting into it and kind of learning about some of that stuff. But I always, going back to my childhood, I always read mystery stories. I liked Encyclopedia Brown and the Hardy Boys and
Uh-huh.
all the mystery stories I could get my hands on.
That's cool. Yeah, and I sometimes I relate to that staying up later. I sometimes wonder, does my son really love watching baseball, or does he just like for me to let him stay up past his bedtime because I want someone to watch the game with? I'm not sure, and maybe a
Yeah,
little bit of both.
and
It's
it's
fine.
it's good either way. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I don't really care either way. That's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah, it's really important, I think. And the same thing, we would let our kids stay up later, half an hour later if they were reading. So they go to bed at eight
Yep,
o'clock, let's say, but they could stay awake. They could leave the light on till 8:30 if they were reading. So that again encouraged that kind of love of reading and the knowledge discovery process.
absolutely. So I
Yeah.
highly recommend any listeners with young kids to check this out. If your kid's into baseball, if you want to get your kid into more baseball and kind of bond over reading, I highly recommend their books. David, as far as kind of if they want to access your books or find out more information, where can they find out more information about your books?
Sure. Great place to go is my website, and that's just davidakellybooks.com. That'll give you basic information on all the books. Of course, you can find the books on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, and many local bookstores will also have them, and any of them can order the books. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at David A. Kelly Books, or on Twitter at David A. Kelly. And it's just you can also, for people that don't want to read, there are audiobook versions of all these books too. And
We've
even if you
listened
read the
to
books,
audiobooks on road
they're
trips as
kind of
well. We've
fun to
done that.
listen to
Yeah,
as well. They're great for road trips. So those are fun to listen to too. And you don't have to be a kid to enjoy them. As you've discovered, there's some history in the books, and they're kind of fun stories built around the teams. And I enjoy listening to those audiobooks, even though I wrote the books.
absolutely. And they're quick
Yeah,
reads. You don't
they
have to
are.
spend the
Yeah,
whole.
yeah.
Uh, well, David, thank you. This has been a really enjoyable conversation. I appreciate you spending the time. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's great. And I love to talk baseball and books. And thanks for having me on your podcast. And go Orioles.
That's right.
Yeah.
the yard, we must protect this house. The other bad birds, haven't you heard? We got that underdog style, but we'll be crushing the curve. And we really don't care what the haters say. We'll be rocking from the city to the Chesapeake Bay. The other